Welcome to On Record PR, where we go on record with industry leaders to discuss best practices for public relations strategies that drive business success. Let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Rubel, host of On Record PR. In this episode, we're going on record with Carlyn LaGrone and Mary Hudson, the co-creators of Overhaul of Advocacy. Carlyn was born on the West Coast, went to elementary school on the East Coast, middle school in the South, and graduated from high school in the Midwest. Growing up in primarily white communities, Carlyn struggled for years with self-love and appreciation for her Blackness. It was not until college that she unlearned many negative attitudes about her skin color and instead felt confident in her identity and began to truly love being a Black woman in this country. Carlyn studied healthcare and the system in undergrad and graduate school with a true passion for improving the health and well-being of marginalized communities. She has had the opportunity to work in roles dedicated to women's health, queer health, and the existing health disparities for Black people. She's a self-professed enthusiastic learner, eager listener, and growing to be an effective leader. And I said self-professed because I believe she already is an effective leader. Carlyn welcomes the challenge and opportunities to better serve others around her and to do this important work. Now I'd like to introduce Mary. Mary Hudson is a queer cis woman living in California in Mawakma, native land. She is dedicated to unlearning unconscious biases and being a positive learner in the movement towards a just and equitable world. As a fifth grade teacher, her advocacy work stems from the deep need to teach her students how to be agents of change and own the power they were born with. Please join me in welcoming Carlyn and Mary. Hello, ladies.
Hello. Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. You definitely truly made me very humble.
You two are the difference we need in the world.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
And I really mean that because it takes people who are brave, who want to get out and speak up and speak out and bring people together to be agents of change. So what I'd love to learn from the two of you, and why don't we start with Carlyn and then jump over to Mary. Tell our listeners about Overhaul of Advocacy. What is it and how did it start?
Sure. So Overhaul is kind of like a bunch of different things to me. And the idea that it's a database that we created, Mary kind of reached out to me during the time where things were kind of getting more intense in our country, back in May after the murder of George Floyd. She was like, hey, I'm working on this Google Doc. I think it's really important to talk about how people can be better allies. She was like, I'm not sure if you've seen any resources or anything that you want to add to it. She was like, I just would love to hear from you. I want to hear your voice. And I remember I was like, wow, I haven't talked to Mary since high school. And this is something that is actually really nice. I feel really seen right now. And so from there, we were working on this Google Doc that just turned into so much more. From there, we turned it into a full database and website and social media account to follow. So essentially, it amplifies Black leaders, Black voices from different backgrounds, LGBTQ leaders with disabilities in different fields. And I think it's just a great way to help someone who's new to the journey or has been on the journey for a while to continue on the journey, as we know it's going to be ongoing, as it's not a moment, it's a movement. So I'll let Mary kind of add to that answer, but I think that's kind of a good start to talk about what our project was and what it kind of is right now.
Thank you, Carlyn. So Mary, why did you start this Google Doc and what do you see it turning into?
So the reason I started the Google Doc is because I was really frustrated. I was frustrated in the people around me not putting in the effort to learn by themselves what they needed to learn. Rather, they were reaching out to individuals who were mourning the death of an individual in their community. And to me, that's absolutely inappropriate and an overreach. So I started compiling these websites, these articles, resources that helped me gain understanding of what my role was. And I started putting it into this Google Doc and sharing it out every time one of my friends asked, hey, where can I get these resources? Where can I find a comprehensive list of resources that I can just use daily to further my knowledge into something that I should have been researching a long, long time ago, or we should have been taught in school, frankly. That's where it should have started. But of course, in the system that we've grown up in, it doesn't do that. So I reached out to Carlyn after, I think it was just
after you checked in on me first and said, how are you doing?
Yes, I checked in on you.
I remember.
Absolutely. So I wanted to make sure she was okay. I wanted to make sure she was taking care of herself and taking rest and making sure that she was focusing on what she needed to focus on to get through this time. And then knowing her background in mental health advocacy, I may or may not have creeped on you a little bit on LinkedIn, Carlyn. I asked her to come onto this project as a co-creator, as someone that I knew would put a passionate hand into something that I saw as just a document. And then we had this wild idea to turn it into a website. 6 months ago, we did not see this going to this extent. And we could not be more happier or more motivated to continue this project.
So while I didn't share this question with you in advance, I'm curious, where do you see this going? So if you looked back a year from now, what would success look like?
Carlyn, you can answer that one.
For me, I think so much about how each individual touch is a success. So the amount of people that follow us is not something that we're stressed about. The amount of people that are, know of Overhaul of Advocacy is kind of not the make or break to me. It's the people that know it and have shared it and that have come to us and been like, this is really helpful. One of my friend's moms texted me last week and said, me and, my husband, I'm watching a movie every weekend from your site for the past, 2 months. And I just thought, oh my gosh, we created this movie list, as just a suggestion for hey, here's some documentaries, here's some shows that show, Black joy, Black life, Black representation. And just to know that someone's actually utilizing it, that's a success. So a year from now, if we continue on, this uphill path where people are reaching out and saying, Mary, Carlyn, I read this book, or I found this podcast that I never would have found otherwise. We keep doing that. If it's one a day, if it's one a week, I'm just so happy to know that we're helping make positive change in that way.
You really are. It's interesting because the first movie after the George Floyd murder that my family and I watched was 13.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
The documentary. And it was very eye-opening. And I think you both know I come from a legal background. I'm a licensed attorney and I worked in the criminal justice system and I never knew any of that.
Wow.
Yeah. So talk about the lack of information that's shared. And we live in a much more transparent world now. And so I thank you for providing the resources for people to learn how to become better allies and how to become anti-racists. Yeah. And there's a lot out there on anti-racism. And I wanted to let our listeners know, read Dr. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. If you don't understand what that means, because I did not understand what it means, it's not about saying I am not racist. It is about changing policy and being an actual anti-racist. And so I do want our listeners to know that. I also want them to know that today is, well, this won't air today. This will air in a few weeks. Today is World Mental Health Day. Is that correct?
It is. Happy World Mental Health Day.
And what does that mean to you, ladies?
Mary, you want to go first?
Yeah. So I've struggled for years with depression and anxiety. And in the world today, where we are in the pandemic, stuck at home, we are seeing numerous amounts of mental health cases coming up from individuals who have not experienced it before. And so having a day or a week or a month to just recognize that mental health is real. It should be taken care of as any illness should. You need to reach out to individuals maybe you haven't reached out to in a while to make sure we're checking on our friends, we're checking on our peers and on our community to build a stronger awareness that we need to realize that mental health needs to be just normed, right? It needs to be a normal experience, a normal human experience that we all go through. So having Mental Health Awareness Day as an individual who's experienced mental health illnesses before, it's very important to me. It's very important to me to know that we're finally creating a community around it.
I thank you for being so honest and vulnerable with our listeners, because I'm sure almost all of our listeners at some point in their lives have gone through something or with someone who has dealt with a behavioral health issue that has been a struggle. So happy belated, say, World Mental Health Day once people listen to this, and we'll be sure to share it out again next year to make sure that people get to hear it twice. So you mentioned the genesis of the platform, Mary, was that you started this Google Doc. And I think Carlyn said that you met in high school?
Yes, we did. So she was a year older than me. We didn't really hang out with each other. We knew of each other. We had some mutual friends. I was mostly a choir kid.
Yep. And cross country. So we kind of we had like some mutual friends, like she said, but like it was more of like a hallway thing where I was like, that's Mary.
Yep. Oh, that's great.
Yep. And so, yeah, I hadn't seen or talked to her since 2012. But
when I graduated.
Yeah. Social media just keeps you connected, which is an amazing time right now to be connected.
Which is one of the great things about it. I do, if you haven't watched it, and I encourage you to watch it as well, especially anyone in a younger generation or raising youth today to watch The Social Dilemma. It was very eye-opening. And while I'm an avid user of social media, and I think it's really important to connect with people and feel connected, and especially if you're lonely, to be mindful that not everything that you see is real, like all of the size 0 or -2 models that we women get to see online. So I just share that as well. Now, what's interesting about Overhaul of Advocacy is this is not a nonprofit. This is not for profit. You're not getting paid to do this. So can you let's start with Mary this time. Mary, can you tell me a little bit about your actual full-time work, and I'm sure this is now full-time too?
Yes, absolutely. So I've been teaching for 4 years. I was a music teacher, but this year I decided to transition into being a full-time classroom teacher. I work at Rocket Ship Public Schools, which is a charter school network that is trying to achieve closing the achievement gap, making public education more equitable and more accessible to especially red line districts, because sadly we still have those in this world. So it's working to close that gap of, equity and creating a community and amplifying the voices of the parents, creating a network of parents and students that are agents of change while, attaining excellence through that, being persistent. We stand on the ground, every Rocketeer counts. Every Rocketeer can do something great in their life. I could not be more blessed to be a part of this network. I think it is an amazing charter school network. I see in my kids just individuals with these amazing minds. They're so persistent through this challenging time right now, learning at home, being, around multiple siblings, maybe multiple family members. Some, the parents have to go to work a lot of the time. So they're really advocating for themselves, advocating for their education, and they're only 10. I actually have a couple kids using this website to educate their parents, which I think is amazing. They present on this website all the time in class when we're supposed to be learning other things. But they get so excited about having these resources and learning brand new things that they didn't know before. Yeah. So I teach 5th grade English, and it's amazing. And these kids pushed me to be the best person that I could be.
Teachers have one amazing job, and I give you credit. I've always thanked my kids' teachers because I wasn't taught to be a teacher. I don't have the skill or the patience to sit with youth who are talking over me. And, so I thank you. And thank you for being you and doing what you're doing. Carlyn, can you tell us a little bit about your career?
Sure, of course. So while Overhaul is not like a paid job, it does influence my full-time job quite directly. I work in mental health. So I actually have 2 jobs. And so I work for NAMI Chicago. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. The Chicago branch is a huge affiliate. It's one of the biggest in the country, as NAMI is a national organization. And then I also work for an organization called Art with Impact that uses art and media and film to help normalize mental health conversation. So as a person working in mental health, knowing that racism touches every aspect of life for people of color, simultaneously, mental health is something that deeply touches every individual in a different way. And just knowing how tough this year has been, the additional stress and strain of being a person of color, the minority stress that we already carry on a daily basis, it's taken a real big toll. So my job is a lot of just trying to bring positive change through community building and community partnerships. I think the biggest goal that I have constantly is to destigmatize mental health. I'm really out there just trying to create conversation in communities that don't often have it, which tends to be marginalized groups. So on the south and west sides of Chicago, I'm having these conversations. I'm challenging, these communities to find the efforts that are existing in their community as well and trying to amplify those efforts, because there are a lot of really awesome groups that exist, in Chicago dedicated to like Black women, or there's a group I just met called Hip Hop, Coffee, and Mental Health. They're dedicated to Black men, and to know what they're doing and how they're trying to kind of find ways to make wellness more inclusive, because the reality is it's not super inclusive right now. I'm trying to amplify that and just continue finding ways to support. So that's my job.
That's fantastic.
Multiple jobs.
I started this podcast with "You are changing the world," and you really are. You really are. And it's people like you and the people you serve and the people who learn from you, who look like you, who feel like you, who identify like you, who you're your role models. And that is fantastic. And I know that a lot of the younger generations don't realize to the extent to which you are role models, because you have your own role models, but I promise you that people are looking up to you. I promise you that they're learning from you, and that what you have done with Overhaul of Advocacy will continue to make a difference. So don't stop. And I do want to let our listeners know that if you have something that you'd like them to add to Overhaul of Advocacy, reach out, because how did we meet? Carlyn, why don't you take that question?
Yeah. So I was trying to go through and just finding as many organizations and websites that had these anti-racism resources, websites, just different lists, because there was a huge influx, during this year of organizations like putting these lists together for folks that, view their sites, for their staff. And I came across your website and I was like, oh my gosh, this website's amazing. Like, there's an anti-racism statement that is so well thought out. There's all these intention in trying to be better and speak up. And I was like, whoa, Overhaul could be great. So I emailed you and you got back to me. And once you went to the website, you were like, yeah, I would love to talk to you and Mary, the co-creator. And so that happened months ago, but I'm so happy that we were able to set this up, because it just shows the relevance. Like, we talked maybe in June or July, but the fact that this conversation needs to continue months later and we're not stopping, and your organization is dedicated to, amplifying our voice and amplifying our effort, just means so much to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's interesting. And I want our listeners to know we are nowhere near the end of COVID. We're actually recording this in October 2020, but we did try to get together, but you both work full time. So it's not something we can do during the work week. So we decided to do this podcast on a Saturday. So this is recording. We're all still in our work from home spaces, but I thank you for getting up early, especially Mary from the West Coast when I'm on the East Coast, and joining us, because this is such an important conversation. And we mentioned the George Floyd killing, and Mary, you reaching out to Carlyn and saying, are you okay? And I don't think people who have never witnessed or experienced death have any understanding of what we saw. And some years ago, I saw somebody get hit by a car and killed. And I was devastated for months. And every time I would get in a car, or I would see something, I would take a deep breath, and it's like post-traumatic stress syndrome. And here we are, the world watching, and the post-traumatic stress, not just the people who are empathetic by nature, but the Black and brown community. Mm-hmm. And so I hold you up. I am sorry for what you had to witness. I am grateful that we got to witness it as a world, because maybe it will be the change that we need to make so that he didn't die in vain. And so when I say grateful, I mean that with the utmost respect, because years ago, we would never have seen that. And you wouldn't have the internet that would push it out, because TV would never have shown it. Right. So we're getting to see what actually happens to our neighbors as a white person. So to the people where I've never been pulled over and felt threatened for my life.
I think that's a really interesting point you make, especially with this year, because I had so many people as I've said, I've lived in a lot of, especially white communities. And so I had friends reach out and be like, just can't believe this year. Like, I can't believe, like, just all these, like, this shock. And in my head, I'm having conversations with my family or my brother or like other Black friends that I went to college with. And I'm like, they can't believe it. Like, this has been the reality. Like, this is their eyes are open to something I've been seeing for years. The fear that my parents have had and the conversations they had with my brother when he was 16 and his other Black friend, the advice they gave him driving home, always have a white friend with you and always have your white friend in the front seat. Don't have you and your friend here. They had all these different conversations that this has been my reality, my whole life. But again, I mean, it took me a minute to even open my own eyes. So I understand, but I am also grateful that people are recognizing it in 2020 and hopefully not going to ever close their eyes. The reality is, now that you've seen this and you've opened your eyes, we can't go back. We truly can't.
I don't think we ever will. And I really mean this. I have the utmost hope. And we have several generations in the community who are speaking up, people who are changing their views and who have become so much more empathetic because they want to learn. So my heart goes out to any community, anyone listening, both of you, anyone who has felt discriminated against because of who they are, whether it's your skin color, your gender identity. I don't even like to use the word race anymore because of what Ibram Kendi talks about the origins of the word race. And so I'm still learning.
Yeah, that's awesome though. It's awesome that you're learning. I love that.
I think we're all going to have to continue to learn. There's so much that we need to learn. In our earlier, when we were getting to know one another, you mentioned something called compassion fatigue. Mary, can you tell us a little bit about compassion fatigue, what it is?
Absolutely. So from my own experience with compassion fatigue, we all get it. It's having this overload of information that is geared towards bettering yourself as an advocate, but it's also really heavy, right? Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, any of those deaths, all of the information that you learn is, shocking for some communities, normalized in others. And we are trying to be better advocates and getting all of this information and consuming it and trying to digest it all at once. It's not healthy, and it leads to fatigue, and it leads to someone stopping and giving up because they feel as though there's too much information in front of them and they cannot begin to even comprehend how to go through it. So I think one of the main reasons Overhaul works for us is because it gives you a start. It gives you a way to just start with one article one day and maybe watch a movie during the weekend. It spreads it out so that way it's a lifelong journey and it's doable. It's achievable. You are achieving your action steps to defeat compassion fatigue, right? Rest is resistance. I'm learning that through the NAP ministry, and everyone should go look up the NAP ministry. It is amazing, amazing, amazing.
Can you spell that for me?
Yeah, NAP, like
NAP. Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ministry. Oh yeah. And their whole thing is rest is resistance, because when we look at the systems of white supremacy in society, we keep working because that's what's been fed to us. You are not a whole person if you do not have something that you produce or you're working towards, or we are so defined by the workday, the work week, that to stop is protest. So with compassion fatigue, it's us not stopping and then being forced to stop because we are hurting our mental health, or we're hurting our physical health in a way.
So I work to be an ally.
Yes.
Work to be an anti-racist, but breathe.
Breathe. Take a break.
Self-care is so important. I just think about that all the time. Because I often get people, reaching out to me to say, it's not your job. It's not your job to be educating others. It's not your job to be like making this website. And I respond to that by saying, like, I know that it's not. I'm doing this because I care and I love it. And I found my voice so late in life. It's giving me kind of a sense of control and taking care of, like, a sense of control or a level of control I often don't have that I feel in society. So it's allowing me to make positive change that I feel good about. But again, that doesn't change the fact that this work is exhausting and that I do need to, like, sometimes just close my computer. And I tell Mary all the time, like, I'm unplugging today. Like I'll talk to you in 2 days. Like self-care and rest is a part of ensuring that you can rest and keep coming back to it and keep showing up, because if you're burning out, how do you expect this to keep going is kind of what I think about.
Something you said, so there's something I've been struggling with, and maybe you both can enlighten me a little bit. And Mary, you alluded to it. A lot of people were reaching out perhaps to Carlyn and other people of color and asking, well, how do you feel? Or are you okay? Or what does this make you feel like? And then people say to you, Carlyn, that's not your job. And this is where I struggle, because I want to be able to ask questions. I don't want to ask the wrong questions. I don't want to sound insensitive. I will look for resources, but without the conversation that's happening and people like you providing the information, how do people like me learn?
I love that you asked that, because I think there's no right answer and each individual will have a different one. For me, like I said, because I came into loving myself so late and like being proud of being Black and I was neglecting these conversations so much. My parents would try to bring it up when I was younger, and love my parents. Like I wish that I had been more receptive to it, but because I didn't do that, I have a real strong interest and eagerness to use my voice and have these conversations right now with you. Not every Black person's going to feel that way. Black people are tired and a lot of us are very angry. It's been a really tough time, but I think that there also are really incredible spaces and ways to learn from Black people, like you're saying, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you're like burdening them. I think you just have to be really intentional with how you do that.
So is it okay to ask, may I ask you a question? And if you prefer not to have this conversation, just say, I don't want to have the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think giving people an out, you don't want to also feel like they're like this tokenized person that you're like, I need to, that you're burdening them. Because we always say like, take the burden off this marginalized group and do the work. So say you're doing the work. It sounds like you definitely are reading and you're trying to continue to better yourself. But again, like you said, sometimes it does take like personal conversation, but there's so many events and open roundtable discussions. On Overhaul, we're always adding these too. It's like I've added so many events on Eventbrite that are free with like Black women having an open discussion where they're like, let's have a candid conversation about race, where that is the space, a dedicated space where you're not maybe like stepping in or infringing on someone's boundary that they've set. Because the reality is sometimes people ask me questions and I'm like, what? Like, this is not my job. But like, if I am approached and someone asked it in that manner and they give me the out, if I feel up to it, of course I'm going to answer. But if I don't, I will say, I respectfully decline this. I'm not interested in that right now. And also, I think it also depends on like your level of intimacy or connection with that person.
Right.
If you're asking a stranger, I just feel like that's not necessarily great. But like, I do think that sometimes it also can be like beneficial and healing for a Black person to just vocalize and just speak all this pain and all this, agony out into the world. And so I've been really lucky to have such incredible, incredible friends, Mary included. I feel like I can like just vent about these things that I never really got the chance to, I really didn't get to put the words to for so long, whether it was about my insecurities about my hair, whether it was the comments I literally always still get about the way I talk and the eloquence. Like,
what, you talk very white for being Black? Is that
was called an Oreo growing up?
Microaggressions you've dealt with?
Yes. If I had $1 for every microaggression that I had received, I would not be in college debt. No, I'm kidding.
So I'm going to ask you both, send me any microaggressions that you've experienced, because I'm writing, my next blog is on microaggressions in language.
Oh, definitely.
And to enlighten our audience, a microaggression are those things that you might say that you don't realize are hurtful. And you might not even have a negative intent, but to say to a Black woman, anything about, oh, your cornrows don't make you look professional, or it's
you sound so educated. I used to get that all the time.
And I'll tell you, there's so much that we have to learn. I've learned that there's things I have said, not just microaggressions, but also the origin of language and terms. And we have a blog on that as well on our website, because we're trying to learn.
Yeah.
I used to say all the time, well, that's the low-hanging fruit. And then somebody said, well, you do know that for anybody who has experienced lynching, you don't want to say that. Like, right. I didn't know, but thank you for enlightening me. I mean, that's where if people wouldn't take it personally, and they would say, thank you for enlightening me. So you've provided with Overhaul of Advocacy a great way for people to be enlightened without having to put the burden on anyone who identifies in any way different than you.
Right. Exactly. And the reason for that is, I've been listening a lot. I've been listening. I think that's one of my jobs right now, is just listening to a community that I need to listen to and not putting my own voice into it. And a lot of what I'm hearing is that the same with Carlyn, is that, if you just bombard individuals, honestly, any individual, with a bunch of questions and don't take time to take care of them as you would take care of yourself, you are not an advocate, you are an aggressor, and it's not okay. And from what I have learned, there's a lot of different people who have a lot of different feelings about it. There's this woman called Maisha Hill. She lives in Oakland. She's amazing. And she has a group, an advocacy group, where she has opened herself up to be that person for a ton of white women, a ton of white women, my mom and me included. And that's kind of how I started figuring out checking your privilege. So her group is called Check Your Privilege, and it is a way to learn about all of the ways white supremacy has seeped into our society, into our daily lives, and how to actively go against it as a white individual who benefits from that society. So there are spaces. There are so many spaces that are opened up specifically to a lot of white individuals, as we are the ones that need to do the most work, because no one gets an out from white supremacy.
And we should want an out, but unfortunately many do. So we are coming up on the hour, and I would like to ask you each to tell me if you had one resource to be a better ally to start. Let's say one resource to start, a starting point to be a better ally or anti-racist. What would that one resource be? Besides Overhaul of Advocacy, of course.
Dang. that was my answer. I might need a second for that one, because I think one resource I think it's hard to answer that just based on the type of learner this person may be.
Fair enough.
With some people love reading, some people don't. Some people love podcasts, some people love shows. I'd say when it comes to trying to find something for you, go to the site and everyone's a little bit self-aware, like knows what works for them and especially what kind of learner they are. Oh, but I'm trying to think of
well, for me, I started with How to Be an Anti-Racist.
That's a really good one.
I fall asleep when I read, so I listen to the audiobook because I'm on a computer all day, and it's really helped me. And I watched the show 13, which was the documentary, which was so eye-opening. But I'll answer for both of you. Go to Overhaul for Advocacy. Learn from these beautiful ladies who have given of their time. You have one. Go ahead, Carlyn.
I just thought of one. So Procter & Gamble did a really, really awesome kind of series that they created of just 1 minute videos. So it'll be like the look. So it's from a Black person's perspective, maybe they're going through a store and you see the looks that they receive when they're walking in a store, the more attentiveness of them being in a store because they're Black, or the way someone's walking down the street. It tackles these different day-to-day things that you might not notice that a Black person experiences. And not just that, it has discussion questions that you can, watch these very short films. They're literally less than 3 minutes, and have watch them with some friends, hop on a Zoom and discuss these questions, because it's a really awesome way to learn. They're guided.
Is that on your website?
It is. It's on the homepage.
Okay, great. Because I'll make sure it's linked in the podcast notes as well.
They did a really good job. I was really impressed. So I definitely highly suggest that as an initial first look, especially. I feel like everyone can, try to watch it, the attention span to watch a short video and then discuss it with friends
Absolutely.
So what's one social media platform where people can connect with you, where you'd be open to receiving feedback?
Absolutely. So we have our Instagram, Overhaul of Advocacy. It's just at Overhaul of Advocacy. Our DMs are open. We absolutely love getting feedback. We cannot grow without feedback, whether that be critical or positive. All is welcome. We are trying to learn. We are trying to grow. We're trying to expand. Be on the lookout for a platform soon on our website that has to do with education and racism. I'm actively working on that, as I am a teacher, and would love to see that. But yeah, Overhaul of Advocacy on Instagram. We also have our Facebook page. And then on our website, there is a section where you can submit any resource that you think would be an amazing add to our website. We are always on the lookout for new and fresh eyes for new material and everything.
Yeah.
Well, I'll throw one out to you. We have a podcast by Reggie Shuford, who is the executive director of the ACLU of Pennsylvania.
Oh, cool.
And I think you'll both love him. I loved speaking with him, and it was very enlightening. He's from Wilmington, North Carolina, and has a wonderful story to share. So I'll throw one out for your listeners because I have the great honor of being able to call him a friend and to learn from him regularly. With that said, Carlyn and Mary, I'm thrilled you could join me today. I have enjoyed our conversation immensely. I'm sure our listeners have too. I want to just say thank you for being you.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us. This was incredible.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
This episode is sponsored by Mary Rubel Communications. Recognized as the #1 agency by the National Law Journal, Mary Rubel helps top businesses and law firms with high-stakes public relations and marketing, reputation management, crisis planning, and incident response. Mary Rubel also supports law firms and their clients with high-profile litigation, media strategy, and training. To learn more, go to furierubel.com or email podcast@onrecordpr.com. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider rating us on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to On Record PR at Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, or Apple.
Thank you for listening to On Record PR. Visit our website, onrecordpr.com, to subscribe to the show, share it with your friends on social media, find show notes, additional episodes, and more information. We'll see you next time. In the meantime, feel free to send us questions or show ideas at podcast@onrecordpr.com.